Welcome to the Guitar Builders Collective Chat, audio and visual podcast, a weekly discussion about all things guitar building and some random tangents as well, featuring members of the Guitar Builders Collective from all around the world. The Guitar Builders Collective is a like-minded group of individuals that have come together to share their experiences, knowledge, and inspiration for guitar building. Each week you can join us in the live YouTube chat or catch up at a later point. It's also available as audio where you'll miss out on seeing our lovely faces and some of the visuals we share along the way. You can also find the Guitar Builders Collective via our forum, over on Instagram where we share images of members' builds. We've got... Oh, hello everyone.
Hello there. Hello.
Hey.
Good evening.
Hello.
Great. So I can see there's a number of people already in the live chat on YouTube, but if there's anyone there if there's anyone watching or listening on audio who can't see our faces, I'll just introduce who's here. We've got, as always, from America, Mark and Scott from Bonehead Guitars. And then in Australia, there's Arran from Adair Guitars.
Good evening.
And then in the UK, Dave from Footstep Guitars.
Hello there.
Plus our guest, Eddie from Electric Lady Guitars. Hi, Eddie. So those of you that are regulars on YouTube will know there's a live chat that goes on alongside this, and we tend to use that chat to answer questions and things in. And Eddie's been a real regular in the chat the last 6 months, maybe. I'm not really sure, Eddie. But this is the first time I had a chance to see you and speak to you in person. So it's great to have you here.
Yeah, nice. Good.
I can see you've got some instruments behind you for us to chat about as well. Listen, I just want to trail ahead for anyone that is listening so you know what we might talk about, but as always, don't 100% know. The first time I saw Electric Lady Guitars was in relation to how Eddie marks his guitars, as in how sustainable the wood is, where it comes from, and how when you get the guitar, you know exactly that. And the other day, he sent me a picture of a chainsaw. So I'm sure we're going to get onto how you source your materials, Eddie. But also often we end up talking a bit about storage and how you keep records of what you're making, which is something I know I don't do very well anymore, but I really regret that. And then there's lots of other questions you always ask, which are quite technical about guitar making. So I'm sure we'll get into all of that as well. But do you think I can just start off, Eddie, by asking you how you got into guitars? Like not just making them, but playing them, and if there's a backstory to that.
Thanks for having me on first, guys. I've come to have a profound respect for all of you, and I'll do my best not to let it show. So,
be kind.
That sets the tone for the afternoon, doesn't it? I grew up in the 1970s, which I still think, well, 60s, 70s, I still think is probably has to be the coolest era for music and for guitar.
Yeah.
I'll never forget the first time I heard my sister playing a Day Tripper or, things of that ilk. Very heavily into 10 Years After and all those songs of elongated solos, when we used to really listen to music. So by the age of 13, I thought I've got to do something about this. And I worked really hard and managed to become an average guitarist. Now, when I say that, it's not false modesty. I mean, there are people that can blow me out of the water by the time they've tuned up the guitar. But one thing, and I think we'll all agree, works is when people play with passion.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's the same with lutherie. Yes, there's technical aspects to it, but if you can't put passion into something, then do something else. So I got by as a musician over the years, I guess, through my passion more than my technique.
So do you remember, Eddie, when you were first learning, what your first guitar was, out of interest?
Well, I had some kind of cheap plywood acoustic, but my first electric was a model called a Rapier 44. I don't know if you've heard of that. Is it Washburn? Somebody will correct me on that. You caught me out there. it had single pickups, but of a square, almost sort of P90 style. And the 33 had 3 pickups, the 44 had 4. And ironically, this was at school, and one of the guys, a friend of mine that we kind of formed our first band with, he also happened to have the same model guitar. So how that came about in the same little town, I grew up in a part of the world called the Vale of Evesham, which isn't that far from Dave, where he's based in Worcestershire.
Yeah.
There we go. There's a picture of the...
Yeah, I've just put one up.
Wow, yeah.
That looks so cool.
It does.
Yeah, the headstock is a bit... But
There's something I really like about that sort of what I'm going to call a vintage look now, where especially around the edge of the pickguard, that really thick black line, like no 3-ply, it's just really solid. I love it.
Yeah. So there we go. It was things like Status Quo and T-Rex, and I kept trying to push the band more towards the heavier, interesting side of things. But like all school bands, they don't do much and break up, or they stick together and go places, So I was always tinkering around. You first of all, you get that problem where you're turning the volume knob and it just keeps turning and turning. And next thing you know, it's cutting out because screws have come loose and you've got to take the pick guard off to sort the screws out. And that was the beginning of it, really, just messing around and tinkering with guitars. When I was at college in the 1976, 77, a friend of mine said, you ought to come over to a little place called Bishampton, which is a tiny little village between Evesham and Pershore, for a party. And I said, I'm not really a party chap, I'm more sitting in my bedroom learning guitar. But it just so happened that he was friends with some of the road crew that worked for a band called Black Sabbath, you may have heard of.
Right. Okay.
And, anyway, long story short, my brother and I, when we formed a band together, but that same sort of time, we befriended the guys by drinking in their local watering hole in the little village Bishampton there, the Dolphin. And occasionally Black Sabbath would turn up when they were sort of rehearsing, ready to go over to a recording studio. So we got to know some of the crew, and some of the crew split off and ended up working for another little band you may have heard of called AC/DC.
Very good.
So Graham Wright, that was Bill Ward's drum tech, and Keith Evans, that was kind of the guitar tech, more personal assistant with AC/DC, were great friends of mine. I don't know what makes a friendship. We don't know. Maybe they saw my passion and thought, well, we could have some laughs with him. I don't know. So we used to blag backstage passes and guest passes, and when they were touring the UK, we'd go 4 or 5 gigs in a row. And I'll never forget that first feeling of standing backstage, sort of left of stage, with all these flight cases. And it still has that effect on me now. The sight of flight cases and a drum kit set up, I think it's the anticipation of what's to come. I can't explain it, but I'm just as happy side stage watching a good band than I am actually on stage performing, which I don't do these days now, due to circumstances.
That must be incredible, though, on a set stage like that with those bands.
Yeah, it's one thing, Keith, and I'll give this advice to anybody out there, actually, that's in a similar situation, maybe going out with a daughter or a friend or relative of somebody famous or whatever. But Keith always said to me, he said, you wait for the musicians, the stars, if you like, the celebrities, to invite you into their space. don't push yourself in there. But where the road crew and the techs were concerned, I was all over them. One of the guys that did the guitars, he kind of took over from Keith, lovely guy called Robert Usher, Plug, as we know him, taught me a lot about looking after guitars and changing strings and setting them up, and sort of set me on my way a little bit. So he was there restringing, Malcolm Young's guitar, Angus's guitar. Remember this flight case, absolutely full of Gibson strings. I've never seen so many strings. And about that time, Keith said, "Do you want to come with me? I've got to go to a chap called John Diggins in Birmingham." So this would have been about 1978. And so I went along with him for the ride, and he had a couple of guitar cases, and we got up into the workshop on the table, and he opened up the cases, and there was Angus Young's SG1 that had suffered a lot from the amount that Angus would sweat.
Right.
And it caused a lot of rot, where the moisture gets trapped in these things. So John ended up making a new body for that. And in the other guitar case, which he hadn't shown me, was a Flying V guitar with a broken neck. Now, unusually, the break was between the first and second fret, and it was a mess. Fibre as wood everywhere. And it belonged to a chap called Michael Schenker. Scorpions,
Eddie, I feel like we will get on to talking about your guitars, but I feel like this could be a podcast about the stories of places you've been and people you've met along the way.
Yeah, well, about 9 weeks later, we went back to collect these guitars, and Angus' guitar just looked like a standard guitar because John Diggins had done a fantastic job on building a new body for it. He did quite a lot of work on some of Angus's guitars, but he only ever got to put the JD logo on one of his SGs, so look out for that. That's a bit of a star guitar, that one. I think it was Donington. They were playing Donington, and he took it there, presented. Angus liked it so much that he played it through the whole gig. First time playing it. Isn't that lovely when someone picks up a guitar for the first time, and that's it, they just mold to it? So much so that they're prepared to go on stage in front of a massive crowd, I don't know how many were there, and play that guitar. Doesn't that speak of the fine work that JD did? Sadly, yeah. John died fairly recently. But the Flying V Michael Schenker one, when we went to collect that, I said, "Oh, you've done a new neck." He said, "No, I've repaired the neck." I said, "But I can't see where the repair is on. I know where the break is." And I just admired John's work so much that I thought, one day I've got to do this. One day in my life, I have got to have the courage to go. I was useless at woodwork at school. Absolutely useless. I went over to metalwork because it just took me longer to destroy the metal than it did the wood. So thanks to the connection with Keith and Graham Wright and different things, 1979 found me working at a place called Light and Sound Design in Birmingham. And my first job working there, I trained as a car mechanic up to that point. So an engineering background. So my first job at Light and Sound Design was building the backline cages for AC/DC for what would become the Back in Black tour.
Amazing. I've got a picture of that from your Instagram. I saw it up the other day, and as you were talking about them, I thought that's going to come up in conversation.
Yeah. So the trusses for all the par cans were obviously made aluminium, and they were welded and made by an external contractor. But every single can in there we made. In the middle of Birmingham, there's a place called the Queensway Roundabout, and there used to be a swimming baths there. And light and sound design were based in the old basement of what used to be the boiler room. So there were tunnels and tunnels underground leading to sort of areas we used as workshops. Quite an amazing place, really. So if ever you get a chance to zoom in on the backline cages, you see there were steel metal cages. And it was basically me and a stick welder for months doing that. And you can see up and amongst the trusses that we've got follow spot chairs suspended. So even those, I can still taste that smell of a stick welder when I think about it.
So was your job there obviously making them, but when they go to wherever the arena is someone else setting it all up, or do you travel with it and involved with the setup?
I travelled with various setups. Fortunately, in this instance, the first time we used that, although it wasn't the first gig with Brian Johnson, but the first UK gig was at the Birmingham Odeon, so it was our local. So Mark from Transam Trucking came and we loaded it up, and how he got down that back alley behind Birmingham Odeon in New Street, I do not know. There's probably 1/4 of an inch to spare either side of his truck. And we loaded it there, and so I would show the road crew how it was supposed to go together. And I think they got it right most of the time. You know, the 4x4 cabs and the Marshall heads were sort of bolted into the frame. I think later on, they just, because of the valves not like being thrown around, I think they transported the heads in flight cases and had them either side of the drum riser. I think if you see later pictures, you see the stack of heads either side of the drum riser on the stage. So it was just basically the cabs, and that left room for us then to put lights in the top of those cages to shine on the audience for that famous phrase, "Let there be light," that they have in one of their songs. Yeah, I'm thinking I'll probably go back and think I've missed some stuff out. So, line sound design over a period of about 3 years, did you know, we had bands, did some stuff for Pink Floyd, nearly killed them because I got something wrong. That's another story for another day. They were at Earl's Court rehearsing for the Wall tour, and yeah, something I did wrong meant all the lights were falling out of the trusses onto the band while they were rehearsing. So I nearly killed Pink Floyd. So all the local bands in Birmingham, bands like UB40, The Beat, bands like that would come and have risers made, or you know, they would have light and sound design do their lights, things like that. So we saw people on the way up. I think there's a guy called Warren that got us the contract for doing the Clash as well. I think LSD did the Clash. And they've gone on to be one of the biggest lighting companies in the world under different shapes and names and sizes, because they were sold and then bought back and sold off again. And I think a film company got involved at one point. I don't know.
That's amazing. I had no idea that you had this whole history to it. Do you know, I, like I said, we could talk all day, but I want to get onto you and your guitars.
Well, we'll get in there. I promise.
Sorry, thanks, Eddie. I don't want to rush you, but I don't want to you to get to the end and feel like we haven't had a chance to discuss.
I just thought you might find it interesting. Sorry if I...
No. I could talk all day about all of this.
I think this is one of the best origin stories we've had so far.
Yeah, most people like, I bought a guitar and it wasn't working very well, so I learnt to fix it.
Yeah, well, we've all... So I had quite a serious breakdown, if you can believe it or not. I couldn't even string a sentence together. A friend of mine said, "Come on down to Devon, get out of the rat race," which I did. I met up with a lovely chap called Pat Deacon that taught me forestry. And I love the fact that actually, although you think it's a menial manual task, it's a nice marriage, like music, between the brain and the body. So it's a physical job, but you've really got to have insight into what you're dealing with here. You know, just cutting, if you're cutting down trees, which I guess is everyone's concept of forestry, it's a part of it. I've planted far more trees than I've ever cut down. Just the way you hinge a tree will change depending on the species, where it's grown, and all these things that you learn of how the wood went on to teaching forestry when Dartington near Totnes had a forestry school, went on to teaching there. So you get a lot of insight with how wood behaves when it's green, which then informs you how wood behaves whilst it's drying, which then informs you how wood behaves when you're trying to turn it into an instrument with stability. It's okay buying wood in, but unless you can really read the grain and you know, was this tree grown on a hedgerow in windy conditions? If so, especially if it's ash, it's going to have tension in the wood. And how you dry it, and how long you take to dry it, and how long you give it to breathe off in between processes is going to affect the stability of your instrument.
It's so interesting because that's not something, because I'm just buying the wood already dried, already chopped up. It's not something that I think about. And I know as we'll get to, you do chop your own wood down. And so you have to go through that process as well. Yeah.
So it informed all of that. At the time that I was teaching, I borrowed my brother's bass guitar, which is part of my show and tell later, if there's time. If not, another year, another time. But he had a Fender Precision, 1974 Fender Precision bass guitar, and the neck was made from a slab cut piece of wood. Okay, and it developed a twist. Now, this was one of two precision bass guitars with slab necks that I know of that developed a twist. And somebody said, there's a guy called Chris Eccleshaw who's a luthier local to where I was teaching in Dartington. So I went along to see Chris, and he said, well, I can put it in a heat clamp, but I would tell you, if wood wants to move, wood will move. If I wrote a book on lutherie, it would be called Wood is Always on the Move. And in parenthesis, in brackets, it would be, oh, what was that metallic sounding thing that just went into the shop vac? Because we've all had that, haven't we? Where something valuable has been sucked into the shop vac. So I got to know Chris, and Chris in itself is another topic, maybe for another day. Lovely guy, very proficient, based in London as an apprentice luthier, violins, cellos, all of that. But it was an era when you had people like Pete Townsend smashing up guitars in the 60s, and there was no one around to build and make guitars very much back then. So they used to come to the violin factory and say, can one of your guys sort this neck out or whatever? And so it happened so often that the firm turned around to Chris and said, well, you better set up on your own. And that's what he did. And you can look him up on the internet. He's made guitars for the, talented and the famous. And he gave me a lot of insight, and I showed him some bits of wood that were going for firewood, some lovely bits of ash and sycamore. He said, how much have you got? I said, how much do you want? We designed the Electric Lady guitar between us. And he taught me how to make, obviously based on a Strat, a bolt-on neck electric guitar to a very high standard. There wasn't time, because of things happening in my life, to take on a full apprenticeship or training with Chris. He has taught others in the past. He had a lot of foreign students at one point. But we kept an association together. But he got so behind in building my electric lady guitars with his other clients that he had to turn around and said, look, we can't go on quite like this. So I set up in 2009 on my own. And was quite busy through to 2013, where I sold electric lady guitars locally to a young lad, because I wanted to go off and do a bit more non-secular voluntary work.
Sorry, can I just ask, where were you based at that time when you were doing the electric lady guitars and you sold it on?
Yeah, it was down here in Devon.
Oh, right, it was, right.
Yeah. I've been very blessed. Well, I suppose a measure of respect, but this is, there are a lot of people out there that just want to build. But I have to admit that the majority of sales I've had is through developing a relationship with individuals, with musicians that wanted their guitars sorting out.
Mm.
And there comes a point where, yes, they can go and buy quite a decent guitar that just needs a little bit of work for 600 quid, but there does come a point where they will eventually say, you know what, I want one of your guitars. It could happen a little bit more for all of us, but it does happen. It will come. Chris Eccleshaw just refused to do the repairs, so people had no choice. Maybe that's a way forward. I don't know. So we had a life-changing experience in 2017 with a family member. So we've been home-based since then, really. We've been isolating here since November 2019. But about 2018, I thought, well, I've got to work from home. So I just took up electric lady guitars again. And it's just, I'm either sleeping or working, basically.
So I want to ask then about your working on them, because like I said, when I first came across them, I'm sure it was because I saw a post or saw something where your guitar was either tagged, or in the descriptions of the photo you tagged exactly where and when the wood it was made from had come from and been cut down.
Yeah, basically, if I felled a tree that had to come down, we're just going to go out there wantonly decimating the countryside and the landscape. But if a tree was diseased or dangerous, but a section of that tree looked like a pretty handsome piece of wood, then I basically would slice it, plank it with a chainsaw, and put it in storage. And so I've had decades of wood in storage.
Right.
The wood I'm currently using on several body builds, it's had 17 years air drying in a barn. So that comes now into my dry room for another further 2 years. Chris Eccleshaw said when people used to bring in violins, very famous musicians from all over the world would take their violins to the company in London. They would do an initial assessment on the instrument, write out a workshop ticket, put it in a box and put it on a shelf for 5 years.
Amazing.
Just so that instrument would fully acclimatise with the workshop.
It's like when we've had acoustic guitar builders on before, and we had Aaron Lucas on talking about the tone woods that he was harvesting. That whole process is something that is so alien to me when I mainly customize guitars, but when I'm buying wood blanks already, I don't always think about all that process that's existed prior to it even getting to me. It's really interesting.
Chris Eccleshaw was very, very hot on. I had to fill in when I went independent of Chris in 2009. I had to fill in the gaps, and YouTube being younger than it is now. But you know, I have to give a big shout out to Mark Bailey, guitar making, who's based up in Scotland now. His videos superb. The attitude was, I want you to do this, you can do this. Where I've come across people previously to that is there's a bit of fairy dust about guitar making, you know, not everyone can do it. Those poor insecure individuals, sadly, but I love that. And then a little bit later on, Ben Crow, some of his videos, especially when he would give an insight. It's hard on a video, isn't it? When someone's sanding, how hard are they pressing that wood? You can't tell. Do you know what I mean? And how can you convey that on a video? You know, even if someone is looking over your shoulder, guiding you, even they can't fully tell how hard you're rubbing. But how hard you rub a piece of sandpaper, especially towards the finishing stage, is crucial. It's critical. You know, you can set yourself back by days by just pressing too hard, you know.
I've been really thinking about things like that because I'm trying to write something, and trying to write a description is even harder than trying to visually show it, which is hard enough.
Yeah. I digress myself there. Sorry, Chris Eccleshaw was really hot on allowing pieces of wood to breathe between processes. Okay, so you shape a piece of wood to the profile of a neck, and then you machine out the truss rod channel. Yeah. So before you rush on and glue on a fretboard, okay, just let the thing sit and rest and breathe for a bit, and you will find, if you put a straight edge on there, you will find movement. Something somewhere has moved. Yeah.
That's why I personally, I like to try to facet. You know, I need to leave you know, a flat plane to actually clamp to, but I try to remove as much material as I'm going to in the carve really early on, just facets, because I mean, every time you remove some, you know, stresses change. And I mean, every time when you remove wood, that's when you're going to get the most movement. So,
yeah, wood is always on the move.
And I don't think I've ever seen anybody else really talk about that. You know, worrying about the flatness of your blank. You know, trying to remove as much material as possible before the fretboard actually goes on. Because I want my blank to be just as flat as humanly possible when the board goes on.
Yeah.
But I know from the past, there were times in the past that I wound up with, you know, variations in the results of putting a fretboard on, and I identified several different things that made a difference. But you know, of course, starting with a flat blank to begin with is number one. But you know, clamping pressure and some things like that. But anyway, sorry.
Yeah,
I know. I've seen a video from Paul Reed Smith from a number of years ago where he's had, you know, talks about the consultants or the logistics people coming through the factory to work out how they can make it more efficient to, you know, build more guitars and quicker and streamlined processes. And he was saying that they identify, because I think, you know, he was saying he does the same thing. Once they cut the neck blanks out, they rest them and they, you know, do something else and then sort of come back to it. And he was sort of saying that from a logistics point of view, he was being told that, you know, you should streamline this and make it quicker and more efficient. And he was saying, no, I'm not going to sacrifice letting the wood, you know, change shape after I've cut it out before I do the next stage. So that was kind of interesting coming from a, you know, quite a substantial guitar factory saying that. That obviously there is a balance with how much money that's losing you as a business, not being able to make as many guitars as quickly.
Absolutely. And then obviously you think about all the factories that aren't doing that. Like there's
Correct,
several factories that just rushing through the process.
Especially with one-piece necks.
It's interesting that even if you have the Paul Vigier approach, where they've got this carbon fibre, between the fretboard and the neck, the carbon fibre ain't going to move, but over decades, that wood is going to respond. We know, don't we? You've had talks about finishes. There's a certain amount of porosity to any finish, whether it's lacquer, whether it's oil, humidity. I mean, bless him, I quote Steve Morse a lot on guitar playing and things, but he was saying that, if he's doing a gig in Dubai and he flies home to Miami, within half an hour of being in Miami, he's got to adjust the truss rod, or the guitar isn't going to play. Now, this is a guy that plays all around the world. It's his living. His guitar's set up to a very fine degree. And if he's saying this is how humidity affects my guitar, what's it telling you? It's telling you that the wood is responding to humidity.
Yeah. What's interesting about that is, as you say, he's someone that plays a lot as a professional, so he knows his instrument, so he can sense those subtle changes and do something about it. And it always makes me wonder what the average player would even notice that. We had Mark from Ferrotone Studios last week who was saying when he first was gigging, he was using this guitar which had a massive action on it. And he had no idea that was wrong because he wasn't aware of how guitars work and things. So there must be people out there playing guitars that are slightly warped or something's gone wrong, and they're not going to know that it's not meant to be like that.
Reminds me of I was at a music festival early in the year, and there was an acoustic guitar, solo guy, but he was from Greenland, so he's pretty much come from Greenland to Australia. So he's gone from, minus 10, 15 degrees, negative to Australia. And it was a hot week that it was like mid-30s. So he's gone from like a 40 to 50 degree turnaround in temperature in the space of 1 or 2 days. And that's what he was saying. The whole festival, he was just retuning and retuning, right. And he was mentioning it quite a bit, that just that massive change in temperature had the effect that it had as a solo acoustic guitar player.
My first real electric build was a short scale bass for a friend of mine who was a professional musician, and he specifically wanted a spoke nut truss rod, where the spoke nut was on the bridge end of the neck, specifically because, and he just went around Texas, but there was enough variation in climate that he was always having to adjust. So he wanted something where he could just cram anything in there and do it without having to remove a cover. Yeah, it's real.
Yeah. The thing is, though, some of it is if you want to use the expression wood memory, I'm not quite sure how else to express it. But the wood knows that there's an ultimate resting position within the internal stresses of the wood. Now, it might only be a slight deflection from how you've shaped it as a neck. I mean, we're talking predominantly neck here, aren't we? I mean, with the exception of the neck pocket, on a body, the body can warp as much as you like, really, and you can still adjust, saddle heights and whatever to compensate. So the neck is the thing. We all know that in guitar making, isn't it? 95% of the guitar is the neck. And so the thing is that if you have two pieces of semi-seasoned wood coming together, how do you know what the stress is, the ultimate memory point of that bit of wood is and that bit of wood is? But it isn't until the client's had the guitar for 5 or 6 years that you find that out. Now, somebody is going to take that to a guitar tech and say it's not playing like it used to, or it needs something doing. I've had a couple of Gibson Les Pauls through my workshop where the neck has actually warped both ways at each end. And I've started to teach myself doing glue necks. This one isn't actually glued yet, but on this guitar. And I'm thinking, really, apart from the fact that one of them was a vintage and the guy wanted to keep the nibs, you know, for the binding on the end of the frets, I'd love to have taken the frets off and resanded the fretboard, but I had to do a compensatory, you know, crowning of the nut to try and compensate for this double twist. And I'm thinking now, I'm actually thinking that bolt-on necks are superior from this viewpoint. From this viewpoint of, you know, I can just unscrew a neck, make another one, you know, bolt the thing on, and the guitar's out the door.
I started off gluing necks in, and then realised that it was much better for me to bolt it on. Much more flexibility. Just going back to this neck bending and that. I just wondered to what extent, when we do laminated necks, that mitigates the problem. So when we've got about 5 or so layers of wood there, all stretching and moving in different directions, you know. And also, I mean, I've never used one, but to what extent carbon rods in the neck actually mitigate that problem as well?
Yeah, you're coming on to my show and tell there.
Well, why not? Maybe we should. By the way, Eddie, there were some compliments for the guitar you just held up.
Thank you.
And if anyone's listening on the audio, there's links to Eddie's YouTube and Instagram, so you can see photos of this as well.
Is that a hollow body then, Eddie?
It is. One of the things I like to do, because it saves messing around with binding, is I like to hollow out from the rear.
Right.
Yeah. So you've got about a 4mm, 3.5mm top there. But obviously, when you've got the carve and you're hollowing out from the back to the carve, you've got to really monitor what you're doing. Yeah. It's just the way I personally prefer to do it, you know. So this, you can still hear me while I'm doing this, can't you?
Yes. Yeah.
See if we can talk about something useful. Now, I don't want to get into the debate of carbon rods good, carbon rods bad, in terms of having no truss rod, just having the carbon rod. That's a different debate and a different topic. But because I've come across this twisting in the necks so much, if particularly I want to use a slab piece of wood, because I can't afford to throw every other bit of wood away, and if the grain is straight, you know, it's going to make a fine neck. So what I do is I augment. Okay, the truss rod channel isn't in that one yet, but maybe truss rod channel. Okay, so when it's a slab piece of wood, which is slightly more prone for quarter sawn and slab, that's another topic for another day, isn't it? But what I use, because it is so cheap, it's ridiculous. Oh, I have one of these out. I don't know if you can see that. It's 2mm.
Yeah.
Sorry to use metric, guys, for some of you. It blows my mind when luthiers talk about 64ths, and I'm thinking. Yeah. So I purchased this. This is 1 meter long. I'm sorry I can't. I should have looked up the price really for this show and tell, shouldn't I? But believe you me, this is a lot cheaper than the carbon rods that they sell for guitars. Okay. Now, obviously, it's flexible that way, but once it's epoxied into the neck, there's no movement that way. And you know yourself, if you try and get a steel rule and bend it on its edge, it's not going anywhere, is it? So, in theory, for this neck to twist would mean that one side's got to go down and one side's got to go up from the center point. So this is my engineering background. So that's my approach. I will augment a slabbed piece of wood, slab neck, with those carbon strips. Now to do it,
I would worry with those carbon strips that I would end up, when I'm carving the neck, revealing this strip, because they seem deeper than a carbon rod. So you've obviously got to be really precise with your positioning of them.
yeah, I put them in a depth of 6 mil. Now these strips come in 10, so obviously I've got to either cut or sand away. But it sands away quite nicely, but I will tell you, if you get a splinter, it is wicked.
Okay.
Carbon fiber splinter is evil. So you've probably seen these on the internet already, and you probably seen people use them. Okay, but it's just another way. Now, Chris Eccleshaw and I parted with different viewpoints on some things, but we had a mutual respect. But he was the old school, where you would square off the edges of a neck blank and you would slide the router from the side.
On the edge.
Okay, or you would use a guide and a pin router. Now, I'm not saying don't do that at all, okay? But for me, there's a reason why I've gone over to this, which will become apparent. So this comes with the large Triton router. It's a sled, so you can do a smaller version of it. I'm a great believer that I was taught never use any machinery over 70% of its graded capacity. And if you stick to that, then it will last you a lifetime. You know, I've seen people put 6-inch branches into a 6-inch chipper and wonder why the thing's breaking down in 6 months' time. You know, and that goes for audio equipment and everything. I tend not to put anything over 7. And I do have Marshalls. So obviously, okay, the router will slide up and down on that sled.
So is that a sled? You've made the whole unit, but the sled you've bought in, is that right?
No, the sled came with the Triton router.
Oh, right, okay.
Okay, it comes with it. It's really good. I've got several Tritons of different sizes, but I tend to try and use the big one when I can, because it just whistles through everything. It sort of laughs at it. It's great.
I'm just going to share. I've got a picture of this from your Instagram, which is really clear. So I'm just going to share that as well. For a second while you're talking.
Okay, so the beauty is, that's it. With these adjustable threads for clamping, is I can offset the neck blank so that the line I want to take to fit the carbon strip is central on there, and it's all very, very controllable.
I tell you what, that's really, really clever. I'm going to be making one of these after this show.
I'll look out for your video, Dave.
It's nice design, that's for sure.
I'll tell you another reason why I use it. Okay, so here we have a piece of sycamore that I planked with a chainsaw, and it's been run through a planer. Okay, the sycamore's quite good, close grain. You can actually plane it green. If your knives are sharp on your planer, you can plane it green, but obviously oversized, because whilst it's drying, something somewhere is going to move. Okay, so this was a property called Viper's Key on the edge of the River Dart. I don't know, you can see that, yep. February 2020, and I've oversized it to 31 millimeters at the moment. Final size will be 20. Okay. Now, if you see these lines here, we're going from towards the center of the tree to the edge of the tree. Okay? So each line represents 10 years growth. Can you see that?
Oh, yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Can you see how when the tree comes up against its competition, which is the next tree, okay, the sideways growth of the tree slows, but it pushes the tree up. This is why trees, when they're grown as crops, you thin them out so they can put on a bit of beef, okay? But you want just enough competition that they're going to shoot for the light, Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. Now, these tighter rings here, they're the ones I want. I want as many, just like an acoustic guitar top, you know, for a neck. The tighter the growth rings, the tighter they are, the straighter it is. You've got stability, okay? But there's an issue. If that was going through a mill, okay, but can you see that live edge? If that was going through a mill, then you'd lose some of those tight rings. The beauty of that system there is I can grip a piece of wood that's got two irregular edges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can work to a center line.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So I can calculate, you know, where the edge is going to be 20 millimeters from the flat face once I formed it. Okay. And I can say, right, that is going to be the edge of my neck to maximize those tight rings.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah. So there we have it. Sycamore, by the way, is a poor relative of maple. Some people refer to it, you know, in the marketplace as soft maple. Yeah, you can dig your thumbnail in and you will mark it compared to rock maple. But if you know, it's got the same properties, and they used it in Europe for violin making for centuries. So this is a different sycamore to you guys in the US. Okay, European sycamore is a very close relative to maple.
Can I just ask Addy to step back a bit? You said the year that was from, and you said you were you earlier on. You said that if you see a bit of a tree that looks like it's worth keeping, when you're cutting it down, you'll keep it. Does that mean you're still in the process, or were until recently, of chopping down trees for someone, or are you literally going around looking for trees that have fallen down naturally? And
I've got to the point where I've got quite a few stables and a few barns full of slabs of ash and bits of sycamore. I could probably proportionately do with a bit more sycamore over time. I think if this, yes, to answer your question, sorry, yes, I am to some degree still contracting, but it's with current circumstances and having to isolate, it's limited.
Yeah.
So I'm rather pleased that over the decades. I mean, in 2013, when I sold Lady Guitars, the amount of wood that went, it still now breaks my heart because I've been trying that for decades. But I think if this planet of ours, I don't want to get political because I'm a non-political creature, but if this planet of ours is going to have a chance to breathe, I think the more things we can source locally, you know, the fewer miles it has to travel. The irony is, of course, someone's going to tour the world with these guitars. You know, the irony isn't lost on me. But I think it's a lovely ethos for people to go like, that's where my tree came from, you know, and it's part of where I grew up, or I used to come on holiday because Devon's beautiful, you know, do come. I don't want to get political, but I just think, I mean, I would love to source every component of a guitar locally here in the UK. It's one of the reasons I use bare knuckle pickups as much as I do, is the fact that they're southwest based.
Yeah, right. There is definitely something to be said for doing as much as you can locally, I think. But you know, it's a hard. I always thought it's a hard balance financially as well for certain things. But then at the same time, if you look hard enough, because I remember when Curtis from Goth Rider Creations was on ages ago on this show, he lives not that far from me really in the grand scheme of things, and he was talking about a place in between both of us that does reclaimed wood. Absolutely not for guitar making, but there are pieces that are the right size and the right sort of woods for guitar making. So it's a matter of if you look hard enough, you can find the right things or reclaim things in some ways.
Yeah. I mean, and also repurposing.
Yeah.
You know, that's why, like, you had Garby on the other week. That's one of the reasons I admire her so much. Not just the fact that she's using everyday tools that we can find in Lidl, you know, Aldi, you know, you know, and she's doing it in a home, you know, but she's repurposing intelligently, understanding what woods can be repurposed. I'm going to shoot myself in the foot now, aren't I? But I regularly go on Facebook Marketplace and and just punch in mahogany or some such, you know. And the other day there was a property in Plymouth where this guy, surgeon, had a house built in the 1970s, and all the wood was Brazilian mahogany.
Wow.
And these people, a young couple, wanted to come in and modernize it. You know, it's a bit dark for some people, isn't it? You know, the window, the bookshelves, all Brazilian mahogany. And unfortunately, I went and bought some nice 2-inch slab shelving, which I'll do for a Les Paul or something in the old tradition. But sadly, I salivated far too much in front of them, and they're now going to put it on the open market.
The price better.
I'm no good at poker.
Yeah.
I'm rubbish at poker.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, you've done that
for repurposing. Yeah, I mean, some of the wood
anything you want.
Sorry, could you repeat that? Sorry.
I was just like, that wood is trash. I'll give you anything you want. I mean, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Hey, can I just step back a bit? Because there were some questions before about you mentioned hollowing out the back of your carved top guitar behind you. And I think I misunderstood, and Mick put a comment up. Does that mean you then put a back on? Because you said you
absolutely, and apply back. Yeah. I tend to either use I will use various things, but one thing I inherited when Chris Eccleshaw sadly died, and the family, I have to thank the family and the estate. You know, they were very kind to me, and I inherited some tooling, machinery, stuff I'd actually used. It's quite emotional, actually. You know, in his workshop for several years using these things. Now they've come to me because custodialship, you know. But he had some very high quality, you can get it from model shops, but very high quality ply. You know, there's plywood and then there's plywood, you know. I want to try and go over to using some stuff. Have you heard of Bag Press that do the vacuum? So he's very, very fussy. He would do it especially for guitars. If you look on the Guitar Making Mark Bailey YouTube channel and press Bag Press, you'll see them doing a demonstration of how he forms the sides of acoustic guitars. And there's absolutely no distortion. You know, very, very high quality ply.
Just subscribe to Mark Bailey since you mentioned him, because I wasn't aware of him before, so I'm going to check him out. So it sounds like he's been making videos for quite a long time then. But it's a range of woodworking, is that right?
Yeah, he's worked in various guitar factories in the UK.
Right.
He originally came from Coventry. You know,
I'm going to write him on my list I keep up here of potential people to invite on, because he sounds very
he and Carol are lovely, genuine people. They really are. They fall over backwards to try and help you. You know, my ambition is I want to one day go in. I physically haven't got room to do acoustics here because my shed is too small, really. But my ambition is to go up to Scotland and get Mark to help me with doing my first acoustic. I'd love to do that. You know, hey, coming back to the carving from the back, you were kind enough mention the other month about this box guitar double neck.
Oh yeah,
do you remember that?
yeah. There's some pictures of that on Instagram. I'll get them up as well in a moment.
Yeah. So these are basically what the inside of the guitar. Imagine, obviously, the top would come the full width. Okay, and obviously the sides as well, are integral. But this is basically the shape that I carve out on the inside. Now, some people just do a straight block, a bit like the old 335s, straight block. But I'm a great believer that sound waves travel. Sound waves don't travel straight, and they respond, differently to different surfaces. My ambition one day is to invent what I would call the holy grail of guitar. The thing is, I've done so much nice work on the neck, so much nice work on these internals, that I'm not sure now I want to shove it in a scruffy little box. It rather breaks the spirit of the box guitar, doesn't it? It's one step up from a broom handle guitar, isn't it? A box guitar. It's not meant to be crafted.
Well, the thing that you're suggesting, though, is that it affects the sound. So it may not be visible, but it may be audible that there's something special going on inside.
Yeah, people get very hot on the collar about this debate of electric guitars and wood and tone.
Oh.
What I will say, if you're one of these super fast noodlers attacking with a plectrum, and you're playing so fast that the notes are blending into each other, you're not going to notice any response from the wood by the time the pickup has responded to the string. If you're playing long, elongated notes and open chords, okay, you're going to get some kind of feedback from the wood back through the string, which is going to feed through the pickup. Now, you pays your money and you take your choice. It's up to you which side you come down on. But to say the wood has zero effect, if you're playing fast, the wood hasn't got time to respond.
That's the first good argument I've heard, and that makes sense.
So somewhere along the line, isn't that more beautiful than just a block?
It is. I was going to suggest you put a perspex top on the box. So you can do a sort of a Ben Crow there, and I think that would look really good. I think the holy grail of guitars I'd love to build one day is a parlor size, what would look like an acoustic. Okay, but it would play and sound like a Les Paul. Okay, so I have this design in my head. There used to be a guy many years ago who made speakers, and he just used a 4-inch driver. That's all he used, and he carved these speakers. They were massive, and they were like snail shells, and people have done all sorts of different designs, but the frequency responses he got from this 4-inch driver by sitting them in these carved shells was phenomenal. And I want to play around with the internals of a guitar, to play around. So you could have something akin to this, but I think you'd have to remove some material so the back and the top could respond more. And you'd only want the top of the guitar to connect with this where the bridge is, nowhere else. So it's what I would call a floating top. Okay. And a bit akin to the soundpost on a violin or something. You have some pins or something, like a stylus on a record player. Something that's going to transmit some of the vibrations, but allow the top. Okay, but you got this in the middle with a couple of humbuckers. Right. I've been experimenting with this. I mean, I completely agree, but I think just keep it to where the tail stop is. That's the only bit that really should attach, I think. And so you keep the whole of the top as flexible as possible. So keep the blocks really small on each end as well. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do with this acoustic build that I'm working on at the moment. We'll see if it works at the end of the day. But so the more you stop that top vibrating, you reduce the sound from it. You reduce the
you lose that bottom end, don't you? You lose that bottom end. I hope one day that you get Megan Wells on. And if you don't fall in love with her within 2 minutes, there's something wrong with you guys. She talks to her wood.
So was that Megan Weld?
Yeah, Megan Wells. Yeah, she's lovely. I mean, basically she's doing arch top guitars to a very fine standard.
Right.
But it's just her passion again. Talking earlier on about musicians, get an average guitarist playing with passion. He's going to win the crowd and do a good gig. Get someone who can super noodle dispassionately, and people will have a drink and go on and move somewhere else. Megan is so passionate about her craft. And
I definitely want to get more acoustic builders on, and I'm contacting one later, and there's a couple of others that I'm going to message, so I'll add Megan to the list. But what I've noticed is all the acoustic builders that I've got on my list to contact are women. And I wonder if there's something to be said about the divide in lutherie that seems to be on YouTube of the builders here. Is it something that, because that we always talk about it being a more skilled, more patient job. I mean, I don't want to put stereotypes out there, but it's just, I feel like I can't just, if we have our list and you look down and all the acoustic builders are women, all the electric builders are men, we need to somehow get the mix up. So I need to find some women that build electric guitars as well.
There is a lovely lady who does, and I can't think of her name, but I'll send it on to you, Daniel, who builds electric guitars. So,
please do, yeah.
We definitely need more ladies and more men without beards.
But I wonder if it's just because of this, it makes no sense that it'd be because it's more skilled and more patience. What am I trying to say? And what I'm trying to say is it just YouTube is full of people giving it a go with their slabs of wood and chopping it up and then putting it up online? That sounds very derogatory to some of our builders in the Guitar Builder Collective, which is not what I meant at all.
I take my hats off. I take all of my hats off to people who expose their mistakes and their learning curves in the public forum.
Yeah.
I'm the sort to go and bury myself and hide myself away. And then when I think I've achieved something, is then go and show somebody. Now, whether that breeds insecurity or common sense, I'll let you decide.
Well, Scott's always on about how he wants to ensure that his channel is showing that mistakes happen and you have to get around them and not to worry about it. Not that Scott's channel is full of mistakes, but he won't delete a video if he's filming something and it goes wrong. You'll show it. We'll show part of that process.
That's the most important stuff, honestly. I mean,
it is.
If all you're seeing is how everything goes great, then that's just entertainment.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, yes, Cindy from Carmine. Thanks, Hello Sailor. That she's really cool, but she's got her own podcast.
Has she?
Yeah, I think they have a podcast over there at Carmine Street Guitars.
Oh, I'll check that out because I've contacted her before and not got any response.
Yeah.
To be fair, I imagine because she was a big channel when I contacted her that on Instagram, that she probably gets loads of contacts. And it probably just goes into her not main thing. But yeah, I love the work that they do, and I love their Instagram posts. But like I said, didn't get any response when I messaged them.
Yeah, and the idea of like building guitars from the bones of old New York, that's just a killer concept.
They're when you see shots of the shop, it's so atmospheric as well. It's brilliant. It's what I imagined working in guitars would look like. I don't know why that sums it up so much. It's a bit like they're in a room with history all around them, and the history is coming off the walls into what they're building, and they're bringing it to life. I love that kind of feel.
Yeah, so many hit people just walk into that shop too. It's like incredible.
It's like the tattoo artists that I follow online, that it just seems like only cool people go and visit them. But I'm sure that's just the ones they happen to photograph or film. But yeah, yes. I'd feel out of place going to visit. Look, bear in mind that Joe just put that up from Hello Sailor. Joe asked a question earlier about his melody maker, which might have a twisted neck when we're talking about twisted necks. And he was saying, is recarving a neck that's twisted like that the only solution? Is that going to change? He was saying, will that change the tone and the feel of the sound of the guitar? Whereas I imagine the only thing it's really going to do is potentially change the thickness, but probably not noticeably.
It's hard to comment without actually seeing the instrument, but I've known people who have tried to adjust the truss rod, and the neck is slightly twisted because of the old glue, seeping into the truss rod channel. And once that's cracked, it can settle down again. It depends on the wood, one thing, I don't know how you guys get on, but I almost have kittens when the guitar leaves here, and particularly if it goes to an inexperienced guitarist, because some people still lean their guitars against the radiator. People sometimes just don't appreciate how humidity, will affect a guitar. And what you're making guitars for isn't just for that individual to be smiling on stage. It's for the people that are hearing them and seeing them play, that hang around afterwards and say, hey, can I just have a look at your guitar? And they pick it up and they try it, And if the neck is so bent they can only play the William Tell Overture because it's like a bow, then so I don't know about you guys, how you feel about it, but I'm almost, I feel like I need to do a guitar maintenance and care course each time I hand over a guitar to someone, fairly new to it. How do you guys get on with that?
I don't know if I've ever thought about how they treat it. Have I?
Sorry, Daniel. I don't sell guitars as such, but the first great guitar build-off, I made a travel guitar, which was then auctioned off. And I actually knew the bloke who bought it, and about a year and a half afterwards, he said, "Dave, this has gone really bad. The action's awful and everything." And I said, "Oh, crikey! So can you send it back to me?" Now I don't know how he kept it, but I kept it for about 6 months in the house, and it was all right. But when it came back, yes, sure enough, the truss rod need quite a bit of adjustment, and it is just amazing how much that neck bent. And I thought to myself, I'm so glad that I don't actually sell guitars, because it is a worry.
Is it a travel guitar kept in the boot?
Well, I don't know. I don't think so. I think it was kept in his house. But as you say, you don't know the environment, how hot the house is. And my guitars that I have in the room there, they change on a daily basis depending on whether it's the moisture level in the building. I'm always having to retune them very slightly, so that there must be movement all the time.
Well, on the other end of the spectrum, the last guitar that was sent off that I built was sent to Germany, and there wasn't a single bit of wood in that guitar. Right, so there's something to think about.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
I
you
mean,
sleep at night.
So I've had so there's someone I've done I think 3 paint jobs for now on guitars, PRS guitars. He loves his particular PRS. It was a PRS SE. So I bought 3 of them at different points for him and have done paint jobs and sent them off. And the first time I did it was quite early on with me doing image transfer. And I used a technique which I don't use anymore because he said it had started to crack not so long after he got it. And that is something that I was very aware of when I'm doing certain things on my guitars. They're things I haven't necessarily seen anyone has done and left for long periods. Who knows what some of the things I do are going to be like in the future. And I remember this from when I was making artwork for galleries and I used to paint on glass with various household materials, is I've no idea in 50 years if this painting's still going to look like it does now, or if it's all going to crack or whatever. And that's something I remember talking to people who were buying the artwork about. So now I'm not necessarily, when I do the paintwork, doing anything massively innovative on a lot of them, but I am aware that there are certain techniques that I'm doing that are unique, like the space ones I just made. Well, I've not seen anyone do anything like that before, and through doing a couple of them I've evolved the technique that I'm doing because I can see there might be future issues. So I think for what I do, where I think of them a bit like artworks, there is a future proofing element to it that I can't completely say is going to be completely future proof. But it does depend how people use it. So for example, I also make mic stands and I ask people now how they use them, because I saw one of the bands use mic stand I made for them and they were literally throwing it around the stage. And he did say that he's going to move around the stage a lot, but I didn't know he was going to like throw it, and bits of it had broken off. It was quite an ornate skull with bits hanging off of it. It was like an apocalyptic thing. So now I'm definitely for that, using materials that I think are appropriate for how the person's going to use it, because these are bespoke things for someone. I can't imagine they're going to sell them on, but they might do to someone else that uses it in a different way. I don't know if that answers the question about worrying about how people use it and sort of educating them, but I try to preempt certain things and I try to tell people who knows what will happen with these in another way.
I think some guitarists are quite happy to play with a high action, particularly rhythm guitarists, to generalize. And I think you can get away with a fair bit of movement and still strum, up to the 7th fret, when you fine set a guitar. I mean, I played 8th strings on my Fender Strat for years. Okay. It was a thing when we're back in the days when we were using Black Sabbath's rehearsal room at the farm. Tony was using incredibly light strings and detuning, and I just sort of, it influenced me a bit. So when you set a guitar up to the nth degree where it can become virtually effortless, but some people hate it. I had many people pick up my Strat and go, I can't play this thing, But when you do set a guitar up to the nth degree, things like humidity and things like that are generally, I mean, how the Beatles stayed in tune on top of Abbey Road Studio, I do not know. It was, February? The fingers and the strings was done. I've done outdoor gigs in the summer and had to tune my guitar up between songs frequently, So, but the point is, you want the guitarist to enjoy their instrument and come to trust and rely upon it. Okay? And you want anyone that picks it up to go, I do not want to put this down. And you can't micromanage out there. You just can't. It's beyond your control, especially when you see some of the videos of how people at airports treat instruments in cases. But it is something that niggles away at me. So because of my limited ability to exhibit, mix and mingle at gigs, because as a family we're having to isolate still. I've now got a situation. I'm doing a deal with a young girl group called Leonard and the Zombies from Totnes. They've got the passion I spoke about. You know, they've got time to grow. Lovely girls. But now I've got to give them the guitar management, care, maintenance course before they go away with these instruments next week, you know? Because I want them to get the best out of the instruments.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they're currently, they're not very confident about restringing at the moment. So they've either got to get a guitar tech, or they've really got to get the grips with what a guitar needs to be looked after, you know?
I mean, that's something Scott says as well. Guitarists just don't know these things. And like, I definitely think knowing how to set up a guitar and why guitars work in certain ways is an advantage to understanding your instrument, and therefore potentially using it in different ways or doing different things with it. But I don't think it's essential for everyone to know that. But if you're going on tour, you need to, without someone to help you fix it, with all of these problems we're talking about. And we haven't even mentioned if you put a guitar on an aeroplane in a cabin hold, the temperature changes there. Knowing these things is quite essential, I would imagine. So it's great you can do that with them.
My real bug. Sorry, Scott, you go. You go.
I was just gonna say, I overheard a conversation between a guy I kind of know who somebody who's asking him questions about his guitar. He doesn't change the strings. He takes it to the local luthier to change his strings and do a setup. And I'm thinking, and it's an acoustic. I mean, what setup do you expect needs to happen when you change the strings? But there are a lot of players that don't know anything about their instrument.
Yeah. One of the rehearsal studios I used to rehearse at, the front desk would do restringing for you.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was people just taking that up as to save time, or because they didn't know how to do it. But that's a rehearsal studio with lots of musicians coming through.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with letting somebody do that, and then they get the chance to actually check and make sure that it is set up. But I wonder if he's ever changed his strings, if he even knows how to. I mean, it just blows my mind.
Sorry, I was going to say my biggest bugbear is the height of the nut, and I've come across this a few times where and I had it on a Strat that somebody had completely busted the truss rod trying to solve a problem, which was simply because the nut was too high. And when you tried to play something like a chord of F or something like that, it just went out of tune. It sounded awful, you know. And it's such a simple fix, but unless you're aware of that, you know, your guitar's completely buggered, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, most people that I was never all that good at setup, but when you look into it, I mean, the first thing anybody will tell you is that, you know, there's a order of operations to set up, and the nut is number one, or you know, maybe number two after checking the flatness of the neck. But
Yeah.
See, when I do setup videos on YouTube for certain people, I depending on the audience, I won't talk about the nut, because I'm doing setups for people who are just doing it at home as a player. Whereas I think if you're going to adjust the nut and you don't know what you're doing, that could suddenly get really bad.
Yeah.
So,
if it's wrong, that's the point. The point is that if it is too high,
you need to know it's too
what
high.
you do, you know, if you try and fret anything down at the bottom there, it knocks it completely out of tune.
that's why I like zero.
Can I just... Oh, look, Menno's saying that Andy Timmons has strings changed every time he plays guitar. We mentioned before there's a... What is it? I've forgotten who it was again. The Audio Slave bass player, maybe, doesn't like changing his strings. So they have, when he has to change his strings, they have old worn strings to put it on, because he likes that kind of worn down, flat sort of feeling of it all. Look, we're approaching our normal hour and a half. I tried not to go over an hour and a half, Eddie. There were some things that I thought we might end up talking about, which we haven't, which is fine. We'll talk about that another day, because every now and then you'll send me photos, as you did a couple of days ago, of how you store your sandpaper all organised. I have mine in a ring binder, all separated, and you have yours in plastic folders. And the way you keep records of what you've built. So, for example, when I was talking before just about that guitar where the surface had cracked, if I was to think about it now, I'm not sure I would know exactly what make of paint I'd put or what lacquer I'd put on the top. And maybe it was something to do with that. Who knows? But I do want to ask you a question about this, because I've just seen it on your Instagram. Oh, wrong button, sorry. And it kind of relates to your wood choices and things. And the thing that I go on about all the time, which is how when somebody is making their own guitar, bespoke builder, they have far more choice in the exact positioning of the shape of the guitar and getting all the grain. And to me, this Telecaster that I put up on the screen, I love the grain pattern on it and the way it's kind of closer at the edges and more separated in the middle. Do you ever have your dried woods that you said you've had around for ages, and you go back to them and you think that's not going to be useful for something, it's not the right thing? Or do you look at certain bits of wood and you think that's perfect for this or perfect for that?
Wood selection. If you want a stable instrument, you want the most boring straight grain that you can possibly imagine in your body and your neck. Okay, so when people go for these beautiful grains, and I've done them, bird's eye maple necks, figured maple necks, and all the rest of it, there's an irregularity in the grain that makes it attractive, but the irregularity is also a feature of its strength or stability. Now, this particular Telecaster style guitar came from a massive board. I think somewhere else on my site I show it. I could fit 13 body blanks on the one board.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, so it came from that. So it was a massive ash tree that was felled probably about 19 years ago now, and has been drying in a barn 17 years, and then a further 3 years. There we go. It came from there. Okay. Now people say one-piece bodies, you're going to get cupping, you're going to get movement, but when it's on a board that wide, you've actually got quite a bit of stability. Okay, but it gives you the freedom to choose the grain and place the template on the grain to get the best, most attractive result. Yeah.
Wow.
That particular picture you showed before, I stained to accentuate the grain because I'd sprayed the guitar before and finished it, okay, with the classic, Telecaster, buttermilk, is it?
Butterscotch, isn't it?
That's it, butterscotch. You've got it. There we go. Let's keep the drink there. And you just couldn't see the grain, no matter how careful I tried. Right. And because that particular ash had grown in very acidic soil, ash prefers alkaline if it can. So all around the Midlands, Cotswolds, where you've got predominantly flint and ash-based soils, you get this lovely pale ash. Down here on the acid soils, it almost looks like olive, they call it, the effect in the grain. Yeah. But because it was particularly acid soil, the wood was dark. So I had to spray a paler colour as a primer underneath the butterscotch. So for the grain to show through, I had to strip it all back to wood, and then I had to dye the grain. So that was a lot of work, but the result was beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there'll be a link in the description for the video and the audio to Eddie's Instagram, but I'm just going through it now. And a lot of the wood choices, the grains on it just look amazing to me.
Yeah, that's Sycamore from Merivale on Dartmoor. That was the prototype Electric Lady that Chris Eccleshaw built, but I refinished it recently.
Ah, right. Well, that's good. That's amazing to go back to an old build.
Yeah, I think you need to hang on to the prototypes. You know, there's something quite special about a prototype, isn't there? And the other thing about the record keeping, which I'll just touch on, by the way, is especially since Chris Eccleshaw's demise, there's an Eccleshaw Guitar Owners Facebook page. And there's quite a few people posting their Eccleshaw guitars that want to know when it was made.
Yeah, right.
You know, exactly. Or the original spec. Because this is the other thing that those lovely guitar players out there do to our wonderful creations, is they change out the pickups and they swap out the bridge and they put different tuners on it. And they get someone to put different frets on it, you know. And then they sort of think, well, it's no longer my favourite guitar. And oftentimes, these people will come on the Facebook page and they will want to know, you know, via the serial number on the guitar, you know, what the original specification was. And Warren Stanley, that looks after it, and Michael Eccleshaw, Chris's son, they can actually tell them from the records exactly when it was made, which workshop, what the wood was, what the original specification was, and obviously the original costs, which are quite interesting. So I like that idea of traceability, which ties in with business records and just being completely honest and every transaction recorded. And so I can sleep at night with my head on my pillow, thinking if the Inland Revenue knock on my front door, oh, here we are, here's all the records. There it all is. You know, nothing hidden. But, you know, for future owners to be able to trace their instrument back even to where it grew, I think it's just an added little facet, you know.
Yeah, I just put up the decals you had for the Stormbringer guitars, and that was definitely the first time I saw your guitars. Well, am I right? They were trees that were literally felled during a storm, or because of a storm, as a result of a storm, or have I made that up?
No, they're not. Well, probably one of them actually. Yeah, probably one of them is what we call wind fell. We say fell instead of fall over here, guys. Tree felling rather than falling. That particular guitar, what I wanted when I had the Rapier 4-4 was I had a poster of Richie Blackmore at the California Jam, Deep Purple. And it's Richie Blackmore's to blame, really, for the type of music I played and wrote over the years, predominantly. And I wanted that guitar. And when I bought my Fender Strat from Woodruff's in Birmingham, the week before they had one, but I didn't have the money.
Oh.
So I went back the next week, assuming it would still be there, and they'd sold it. So I got a butterscotch finish one because it was the nearest they had. And I said to myself, one day I'm going to build myself that guitar when I get a nice piece of wood. And then some years ago, I approached Glenn Hughes' manager. Glenn Hughes used to play bass guitar for Deep Purple, for those that don't know. And about 10, 12 years ago, I took these Eccleshaw guitars for Soren Anderson, his guitarist, to try. And he loved them, but he had a sponsorship deal from childhood with Yamaha. And we'll come across this a lot in our careers because Yamaha have been very good in getting instruments in schools around the world, you know, spotting talent and sponsoring them. So Soren is limited, but last year I took the 3 Stormbringers for Soren to try, and he chose one rather awkwardly in the dressing room in the afternoon of the gig. He said, I want that neck on that body.
All right.
So I had 1 3/4 hours to swap out the neck onto a different body, and one of the screws broke, didn't it? One of those neck screws. So he's got 3 screws which work perfectly well holding this neck on this guitar, and to do a complete setup, you know, how he likes it, within an hour and 3/4. And he played it on stage that night, and I've got footage of that. And my brother said he smiled the widest smile he ever smiled, and that's what we make guitars for.
Always brings a smile.
So it's kind of a full circle thing, you know. So there's still a couple of Stormbringers. Each one was subtly different. They had subtly different height frets. He went for the noiseless Fender and Damasio pickup ones, but the other 2 have got bare knuckles in. But that was lovely, because although Richie Blackmore still plays, he's not playing with the passion that he once did. Sorry to sound judgmental, I'm a huge Richie Blackmore fan, but he's not playing with the passion he once did, because he's got nothing to prove. He's proved it all. And Soren plays with that passion. And in a different life course, what he was doing with Glyn on stage, playing the anniversary music of Deep Purple, Burn and Stormbringer, it could so easily have been me. And it was quite an emotional thing. And the word just called it Stormbringer because of the connotation of Richie Blackmore and Deep Purple and the Stormbringer album, and the full circle with Glyn playing that. And that's one of life's beautiful experiences.
What a great story to end on as well. I love the historic link to it as well. Your personal history. That's brilliant.
Yeah, there were other things to chat about, but I don't want to take over your channel and your time. Maybe another time we could come up with a list of other things.
That would be great.
I just want to thank you guys for doing what you do, having this forum that isn't asking people. I know you're uncomfortable mentioning sponsorship, and you're well deserving of it, but you're not there to profiteer, and you're not peddlers of knowledge and information, you know, and that is so commendable. It really is. In a cynical commercial world that we exist in, it's lovely that luthiers are like a little pocket that can exist aside from that and support and help each other.
Well, thank you, Eddie. That's very kind to say. And as we often say, this like community is really friendly and supportive and things. And actually, I do have some bad news on that front, which is I saw a message this morning on Facebook, and a few people mentioned it as well, but there's someone called Paul Needs who was quite a regular contributor to, or at least the Facebook Great Guitar Build-Off page that I was part of, but we would have all seen him comment, I think, on lots of Crimson videos, and I never really joined the Crimson live streams very much, but he was on there quite regularly. But unfortunately he passed away a few days ago. So I said to Corey and to Brad that I'd mention on here, because I'm sure there's some other people in here that maybe aren't on those forums as much, that maybe knew him or spoke to him. But that's one of the things about this community is you get to know people, even if you don't talk to them directly, through that kind of interaction that's there and the supportiveness. Things like the Great Guitar Build-Off, people helping each other with designs and ideas and things. It was brilliant.
Yeah, I hope the people at Crimson and Texas Toast have some idea of how it's affected people in that way. You know.
Well, I've definitely heard Ben say directly that he's very touched when people come up to him at shows and things like that to talk about how his channel has helped people, and he's very humbled by it. Yeah,
so, and I've been there too, but the Great Guitar Build-Off in particular, the fact that they kicked that off, I wonder if they realize how
big,
what relationships that were built because of that.
Yeah.
Well, they might find out more if they come on.
Yeah, we're trying to get them on.
I've given up asking. Although I do hope that we get Sean back on soon, because he was great.
Guys, it's been a pleasure to hang. It really has.
Yeah, well, it's been great having you on, Eddie. And as Arran said, with the best backstory of how you got into guitar building from anyone we know.
Well, the thing is, it's like someone said to George Harrison, what is it like being a Beatle? He says, I don't know what it's like not being a Beatle. You know, we just have, and you know, I would never compare myself to a Beatle, but you know, we just live the life we have and try and make the best of it, don't we?
That's it.
Yeah. So just a quick heads up of who's coming up. I hopefully next week I'll be able to tell you some more beyond this, but we've got next week Bobby Jarvis Jr., who's the guitar instructor, and I've noticed recently on Instagram he's been commenting a lot on guitar design, and I want to ask him about this. Slight disappointment with some more recent Gibson designs, and he's been mentioning some of the small boutique builders who he thinks are quite inspirational, so hopefully that can be something we discuss. And then we've got Paul from Milehouse Studios coming up as well the week after that. If you haven't seen yet, I noticed he had a video up about Gibson guitars, which seems to have got like ridiculous amounts of views very quickly, so I'm going to talk to him a bit about that as well. And then not until November, so I can't schedule it yet because I can only schedule 4 or 5 weeks ahead through the software we use. We've got both Cage from Ravencroft Guitars and Ray Baggett coming back on as well. We've got Menno, who's in the chat, coming up at the beginning of October. So I haven't scheduled his yet. That's what I'm going to be doing when we finish here. And he sent me a great photo. Thanks, Menno, for the thumbnail. He said he felt a bit self-conscious photographing himself with guitars. I noticed with watching one of Paul's videos, actually, sometimes he has camera angles where you can see him talking to the camera. And it is just weird talking to a camera, isn't it? Now. I never really asked, but has anyone here got anything they want to just quickly plug that's like a new video that's out that we should all go and check, or anything like that they want to talk about? No,
other than listen to the band.
For me.
Other than everybody should go out and listen to the band called Family from the 60s and 70s that never made it anywhere near as big as they should. Go out and listen to Family.
I'm going to put that in my... Can we find them on YouTube?
Oh, yeah.
Right, I'm plugging it in now in my search.
Yeah, a band from Leicester in the Midlands.
Right.
But once you hear Roger Chapman's voice, you'll never forget it.
Oh, I typed Family into YouTube and I got the 1974 TV show called Family.
Well, I was going to say, back then, I mean, how could they have known what was coming? But I've had to think, recently about names you choose, and how hard it is to actually find you on an internet search. Like X was the dumbest idea imaginable. Why in the hell would you name your damn company after a letter? I mean,
that's how he's named his children.
Search X, and you're going to find a bajillion different things. And Family is pretty generic as well.
Yeah. I've now put in Family Band, and the first song that's come up, In My Own Time, has a double neck guitar in it. So I'm excited to listen to this one.
All right.
Well, and the other is Bebop Deluxe, of course, which many people
Nelson, absolutely, yeah. Saw them live, marvelous.
Listen to a song called Crying in the Sky.
Oh, yeah.
And then ask yourself, Prince must have heard that before he did Purple Rain.
Good. Wonderful. Bill Nelson, yeah.
How to abuse a 335 guitar with an amp on full volume, and he gets that tone out of it. It's incredible.
That sounds great already.
It is. It's good stuff.
Anyway, that's my.
Can I just? I just want to do a quick thank you. So, as you mentioned, Eddie, you can support the channel by buying merchandise or whatever. I've got affiliate links in the video description, so you can buy things on Reverb and places like that. I won't list them all. But then thanks to Owen Kelly, Electric Lady Guitars. Thanks, Eddie. Adair, that's Arran. Brad from BB Guitars, Simon Chapman, Mr. Glyn's Pickups, Dave, thank you. And Ray from Custom Unlimited for joining the membership channel as well. I still haven't worked out properly how that and super thanks work, because it seems like YouTube are taking a ridiculously large cut. So I'm going to be emailing them later to ask about that. But they seem to have taken nearly 70% cut of things, which doesn't seem right.
No.
I think this is something to do with possibly currency exchange. Not 70%, sorry, 60%, but that's still ridiculous. But we'll work that out.
Yeah.
The great thing about having the YouTube membership, though, is it's really easy to do things just for the members. So I've been doing some live streams, looking at tools and things in my workshop. And I'm putting up once a week a little blog about the book I'm writing, which is quite helpful for me because it gets me thinking things through as well.
Good stuff.
Great. So just so everyone knows, if you want to join us live, next week is at the earlier time of 11 a.m. So I haven't double checked with Mark and Scott, but I'm pretty certain they won't be getting up super early for that. But we will see who's there. Great. Thank you again, Eddie. And thanks everyone for watching.
Bye. See everybody. Bye. Thank you, everyone.
The Guitar Builders Collective is a group of like-minded people from all around the world at different stages of their guitar building journey. You can join us over on our forum to seek advice or share tips on guitar building processes, materials and tools, or just to share your builds. On YouTube, we have a regular podcast of guitar building chat where you can join the live stream or watch back on past episodes. Our Instagram page shares posts of members' builds and links you direct to their accounts. And for those of you on Facebook, we've got a private group that you can join, share and chat along with. The Guitar Builders Collective is a welcome and open space for all, so do pop by and say hi. Are we ending? Well, as always, it seems to have carried on live, so I will press the stop button again.